The UN's nuclear watchdog says Iran now has enough uranium for 10 bombs, but says there's no proof it plans to build one. IAEA chief Rafael Grossi says US and Israeli strikes in June caused severe damage at Esfahan, Natanz, and Fordow, yet Iran's nuclear know-how remains intact. He warns that if diplomacy fails, war could return. So where does that leave the Iran nuclear file? Former Israeli ambassador Michael Oren joins me to break it down.
But the Shahab rockets were, 2,000 pounds of TNT, and they didn't take down a room, they took down a neighborhood.
Then, inside Iran, outrage over the leaked wedding video of Ali Shamkhani's daughter, Maryam Sinaiee, of Iran International's website on what it reveals about power and privilege at the top.
It was not only a dress, it spoke of a mentality.
I'm Negar Mojtahedi, and this is Eye for Iran. Ambassador Michael Oren, thank you so much for being here on Eye for Iran.
I am delighted, honored. Thank you.
It's a pleasure, likewise. So I was doing some research, Ambassador, and I came across a fascinating article that you wrote for the Free Press in 2023, and I highly recommend that people go Google it. It's called The Iran Delusion, and check it out. And you speak about a night in 2010. So you were the Israeli ambassador to the United States at the time. President Barack Obama was in power. Ehud Barak was the head of the Minister of Defense of Israel, and you talked about a roundtable discussion with Ehud Barak and DC officials. You were sipping on coffee, and then Ehud Barak said something that surprised you. Tell us about that.
He said, if I get this right, he said, why do you hesitate to deal with the Iranian nuclear program? For you, it's a matter of a couple of hours of bombing. And in a couple of hours of bombing, basically you erase all of the humiliation and setbacks of Iraq and Afghanistan. And everybody in the Middle East will respect you. And it turns out he was right. He was absolutely right. And if you had to ask me, how did the Trump administration pull off the 20 points? How did it end the fighting in Gaza? It was because he bombed Iran.
And it's interesting because in that piece, you talk about how, again, Barak says, use the B-1, B-2 bombers and it'll be done in a couple of hours. And that was back in 2010, incredibly. And here we are more than 10 years later, and under, who would have thought, President Donald Trump, that it actually happened. So what do you think when you look back at that moment now, given everything that's happened since?
Well, it's not just that moment. It's a long-held view of mine. It's a long-held view of mine that soft power is kind of an oxymoron.
How so?
In the world, how so? Well, let's put it this way. I grew up in a Sicilian neighborhood. I grew up as the only Jewish boy in a Sicilian neighborhood.
You grew up tough then.
If you weren't willing to stand up to the toughest bully and maybe even break the bully's nose, even if the bully's brother was going to come back the next day and break your nose, unless you convinced everybody that you were willing to use power, you would always be in danger and nobody would respect you. That doesn't mean to use power frivolously or irresponsibly, but to convince people that you're willing to do it. And, Barack Obama said that all options were on the table vis-a-vis Iran, but the only people who believed him were Americans. Nobody in Iran believed him. No one in Israel believed him. No one in the Middle East believed him. President Biden at the beginning of the current war famously said, don't. Remember the don't?
Yes, just don't.
And everybody did. Everybody did. The Iranians did, the Israelis did, the Palestinians did, because they knew that President Biden wasn't going to use force. Now, he moved a lot of military material and assets to the Middle East, aircraft carriers, F-22 bombers, but nobody thought he was actually going to use them. And so by moving them to the Middle East and not using them, he projected weakness and not power, which meant that when he needed to exert leverage diplomatically, he didn't have the leverage. It translates. It turns out, it sounds cliche, but you make peace through strength. And sometimes, and John Lennon, forgive me, sometimes you have to give war a chance. And it's true. And if you had to play, and the president was asked, how did you pull off the 20 points? He says, well, it's because I bombed the nuclear facilities in Iran. And I got to admit, he was right.
So you see that connection then?
One thing.
So you don't believe that, so
Sure.
The Gaza peace plan happened because of the war in Iran. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that if you had to point out a principal reason, it was because of the bombing in Iran. Because the people in the Middle East like a strong horse, as they say. And human beings generally like small, strong horses. They do. It's just in our nature. It goes back to caves, I guess. A guy who's willing to use the club, you're going to respect. And this doesn't make us warmongers. It doesn't make us, chauvinists. It makes us understanding how geopolitics really work. And you cannot withdraw from Afghanistan the way the Biden administration withdrew from Afghanistan. You cannot fail to live up to a red line that President Obama drew about the use of chemical weapons in Syria and then turn around and expect people to respect you. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way between human beings. It certainly doesn't work that way in the Middle East. Right now there was interesting stories in the papers a couple weeks ago that in spite of the truly harsh criticism of many Middle Eastern governments of Israel and our conduct of the war, that behind the scenes, everybody is seeking strategic alliances with us. You know why? Because we were strong. Because we're strong. It's not just that we took on Hamas. We took on Hezbollah. We took on Iran. We took on the Houthis. And people like that strength. They may at some point think we have too much strength, and apparently the Qataris thought so. But generally speaking, people like displays of strength, and they respect it, especially if it's done respectively, especially if it's done in self-defense and for good purpose.
And in that same Free Press article, you talked about this, I guess you called it the dirty, hairy moment, that very decisive instant where, enough is enough. Do you feel that we've arrived at that moment with the 12-day war? What are your views on that?
Well, I have concerns about the 12-day war, which I can share with you.
Please do.
I always take a contrarian position in Israeli politics. I go on panel discussions. Israeli TV is very different than American TV. You go on panel discussions in American TV, and they're very differential. My distinguished colleague from across the aisle, I disagree with you. I beg to disagree with you. And Israeli television is, you idiot, you fascist.
I watch it. I know.
Okay.
I understand.
So this was an example of this. I went on a few days after the war, and I said, guys, I'm not sure we won. Now, this doesn't mean that President Trump didn't get respect for what he did and do that. I'm going to just blow my nose. I have quite the cold this day.
I'm sorry to hear the cold and flu season came early. I was just sick last week, so I feel you. I'm sorry.
Got it full-fledged, but I'm with you. I'm happy to be with you. Is that from an Iranian perspective, maybe they don't think they lost. And now let me explain. They can tell their story that says, we stood up to the world's biggest superpower for 12 days. We stood up to the superpower's most lavishly equipped and armed proxy in the Middle East for 12 days. And when we performatively fired a couple of rockets at Qatar, the United States immediately backed down. And not just that, they forced Israel to back down. And so at the end of the 12 days, they could say, we won. It's not an irrational conclusion. And it's important to consider the possibility that there are people in the regime who think this way, because we could be heading for a second round with Iran. And I wouldn't rule that out.
Yeah, that's interesting. That was actually, you read my mind. That was my next question here, is that last week on Eye for Iran, I spoke with the former head of the Iran branch of the Israeli military intelligence, Danny Citronovich, and he said the same thing, that a lot of people in the Iranian regime feel like, Israel didn't win in that case. And the fact that the regime is still there is evidence of that, in his view at least. And he also mentioned that another round of war between Iran and Israel, in his words, are inevitable and will be far more deadly in the next round. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree with him, and I'm going to put a finer point on it. Toward the end of the war, and I lived through this war here in Tel Aviv, and a lot of those rockets hit very close to where we're talking.
So you were there at the time?
And it was oh, sure.
Oh, wow.
And it's quite harrowing, because these are rockets. You go into a safe room. We have safe rooms in our houses, which would probably withstand a direct hit from, say, a Qassam rocket or a Fajr rocket fired by Hezbollah or fired by Hamas. But the Shahab rockets were, 2,000 pounds of TNT, and they didn't take down a room. They took down a neighborhood. And so handing it, cowering in your safe word wasn't going to help you. So you had several seconds after the alarm went off where you don't know where this rocket's going to hit, and then the entire building shakes. So it's quite harrowing. Toward the end of the war, the percentage of interceptions went down, and the regime was learning very quickly our missile defense. And so the
So why
number
would
of
it go
rockets
down?
that penetrated,
Why would it go down?
because
It was
because
overwhelmed?
they were learning how our interceptors work. Now, we have the most advanced, multi-layered anti-missile defense system in the world. It's Arrow 2, Arrow 3, which is orbital, suborbital, then David's Sling, which is intermediate range, and then Iron Dome. Iron Dome is the last-ditch thing when you're dealing with a 2,000-pound rockets. By the time Iron Dome hits it, it's already causing damage on the ground. But they were learning. I don't know what algorithms they were using. I don't know what don't know the actual math behind this, but they were learning. And I think it was one of the reasons that Israel agreed to the ceasefire so fast. They were causing us some very severe damage. I don't know how many nights we could have gone on. So it's another conclusion that the Iranian regime might make, which is, hey, we're learning how to get through their umbrella. And right now, what do they have to lose? They're in the corner. They're isolated in the region. Everyone's waiting to see whether Hamas will be disarmed and whether an international force will go into Gaza. But the fact of the matter is the Middle East, as a result of this war, has been transformed. It has been transformed in ways that I think are more fundamental and far-reaching than even the changes that occurred after the Six-Day War or some of the peace processes we've occurred here. We could have a situation where Israel could have peace with Lebanon, could be peace with Syria. If we don't have peace with Syria, it's not because of Israel, it's because of what's happening internally in Syria. Kind of a mess, but not because of Iran. Iran is isolated. Iran is isolated. And it may feel that it has nothing to lose by triggering a second round.
So they would want a second round of war, is what you're saying. And what would it result in for them? Wouldn't it further weaken them? It could, but it also could create a situation where they understood. Another thing they understood was the degree of opposition within the United States to American military intervention here. And it was bipartisan. It was overwhelming, the opposition to President Trump's bombing. I mean, he was very supportive, of course, but and lauded it, but not everybody was on board with it, even within his own party. So maybe the Iranians can conclude, well, we can deepen those divisions within the Republican Party. We can certainly give ammunition to the Democratic Party, and they can see benefits from it. And the fact of the matter is, how much more damage can we affect on Iran? What else? Okay, is there another nuclear facility we can destroy even more than one of those we've destroyed? So I'm giving you a case for why we have to be very, very vigilant. I'm not 100% certain this is going to happen. I hope it doesn't happen, but we have to be on our guard for the possibility that it might happen. So would that mean that in some ways Iran would use it to their advantage in terms of increase their soft power to alienate Israel diplomatically if some people are against more Israeli action in the Middle East? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that Iran sees itself as the hegemon. And these are deep-rooted beliefs. It's not just their brand of Islam. It's the Persian identity. It's very deep. It goes back hundreds and hundreds of years. And they see a challenger. They see a challenger who they view as an interloper. And they may have certain ideas about Jews as well. And that's going to be a big challenge.
And what about Netanyahu himself, the prime minister? Some opponents say that now that we have the Gaza ceasefire in place, that he himself would want to go to war with Iran and to kind of finish the job, so to speak.
Yeah, I read that today. I don't know. I think that's a bridge too far even for Netanyahu. I think he understands the risks involved. The risks involved are very, very great. Very great. We lost something in the order of 35, 40 people. I want to say this very, with italysis, okay? Italysis mine, which is we got lucky. It could have been, the losses could have been much, much greater.
Definitely. And especially there was a lot of support, like you said, from Arab countries as well, who people from the outside may not traditionally see as allies of Israel, but they did show their support to Israel during the 12-day war. Sure
they did. Not just show support, they were involved in taking down rockets, intercepting rockets.
Exactly. They helped save lives, and so it could have been worse, right? Like you said.
Right. It could have been much worse. I interviewed a former very high-ranking official from the United States the other day who told me that the number of rockets that they intercepted totally shocked them. They never thought that they get so high a level of interception.
Wow, that's shocking.
I don't think anybody wants to roll the dice on our side. I don't think so. And that's a big roll of the dice.
Now, if a second round of war does occur, what will the what will the result be coming out of it? I mean, you talked about this first round and that it changed the dynamics of the Middle East greater than the Six-Day War, for example. What can you see if things progress to another level then?
So the other day in his speech to Knesset, President Trump mentioned rather jocularly, right? He said, well, we can have peace between Israel and Iran.
Oh, yeah, he said they can join the Abraham Accords. I kind of laughed as an Iranian.
And I don't. And I got to tell you, I do not. I think that in some way is an almost inevitable outcome of what's going on.
Really? Under this regime, you think that they would join the Abraham Accords?
Not under this regime.
That's what I was going to
regime.
say. That I was laughing at the thought of this regime.
Under this regime. Yeah, no, not this regime. I mean, the Iranian people and Israeli people had excellent relations up to 1979.
Of course.
We have excellent relations between Iranian Americans and Jewish Americans and Israelis. I mean, really, I had wonderful relations with Iranians when I was in Washington. I'm not talking about Iranian Jews, I'm talking about Iranian Muslims. We have cultural affinity, we have history, we have very positive history together. And the Persian civilization is remembered very, very fondly in Jewish civilization. Always very, very positive. So there's a lot there. And it's the regime. And I don't know what the staying power of this regime is. Now, they've embarked on a different type of emphasis. And before they were emphasizing Shiite Islam, and now they're emphasizing Persian identity.
Suddenly, after they've tried to close it for decades and decades and decades, now suddenly they're all about Persian history.
Also, they're Iranian nationalists. But Iran and Israel have something more deeper in common. The Middle East, certainly after World War I, as you know, was divvied up between the British and the French. And they created a lot of countries that were created sort of helter-skelter. They put down a border where their European interests lay, but they drew that border through sectarian divisions, religious groups, ethnic groups, without any thought about how these countries would be held together. Syria is a great case in point. These countries, after the Europeans left, these countries were held together by a tremendous preponderance of central brutal force. And the only way Syria held together is because the Assad family said, if you're not Syrian, I'm going to kill you. And I'm going to kill your family. I'm going to kill everybody you know. That's what Saddam Hussein did. Same thing. The current leadership in Damascus is having trouble because it's having trouble exerting that type of brutality. He wants to be a nice guy, Shara. You can't be a nice guy in Syria. He won't hold together. So now you see the Druze want independence and the Alawites want independence, right? Iran has a tremendous, tremendous benefit over this. Iran is a nation state. Iran has been around for thousands of years. It wasn't created by the Europeans. Right? Its borders are not artificial. And its national identity is extremely rooted in the region. Now, Israel is also similar because we have deep, deep roots in this land. You can take Jews from 70 different countries in the world who don't necessarily share a language or a culture, but they share a tradition and a connection to the land. You put them into this country, we're going to make a very high-functioning nation state, very high-functioning, by any international criteria, because we are a people, as the Iranians are a people, and peoples can make peace. So we did it, I think we did it with the Egyptians. The Egyptians is also a nation state that's been around for thousands of years. It's not an artificial creation. And I think that type of identity enables you to be far more rooted and gives you a basis for peacemaking. And that's interesting. So I'm actually confident about the future of Israeli-Iranian relations. I don't know when, I don't know how, but we could be in a very different place.
Oh, that's interesting. I thought of nation building in terms of that angle. That's a fascinating way to look at it. And recently in a Time magazine article, President Trump reiterated his claim that the bombing of Iran's nuclear sites completely obliterated it, that it was perfect in his words, and that Iran was a bully but can't be a bully anymore. But then we've got the IAEA, the UN nuclear watchdog. They've come out and said that Iran has enough uranium to build 10 bombs, although they said that there's no evidence that they are pursuing or trying to build one, and that the strikes did lead to severe damage, but hasn't terminated the so-called know-how of the knowledge, so to speak. So what are your thoughts? How do you see this? And in terms of, I'd really like to know, well, where does this leave us and where do we go from here then?
Okay, excellent question. In many ways, that's the question. All other questions are peripheral to that question. So I'm asked many, many times, is President Trump right when he said we obliterated Fordow, that we obliterated Tans? And my answer to that is it's an irrelevant question. It's a moot point. It doesn't matter whether Fordow was obliterated or not. What matters is only two things. One is Iran's intention. If it wants to rebuild Fordow, it can rebuild Fordow. If it wants to take the 400 kilograms of highly enriched uranium and make a bomb out of it, they can do it. So that's it. For the first question. The first point is, what are Iran's intention? What does it plan to do? Is it deterred? And the second issue is, okay, what if Iran decides to rebuild Fordow? What if it decides to make one of these 9 or 10 nuclear weapons for which it has enough fissile material? What will be America's response? What will be America/Israel's response? What will the Trump administration allow Israel to do? We're not entirely free agents here. I think that's clear. And these are the pertinent questions. I don't care whether it was obliterated or not. It's not a matter of pride for me. What I want to know is, what are the Iranians going to do in their next step, and what are we prepared to do should that next step be a breakout to nuclear weaponization?
And what do you think?
Well, I think it's a subject that has to be discussed on a very intimate level between the United States and Israel. Now, for the last more than 10 years, close to 15 years, I'm getting old here, I tell you.
No, don't say that.
I say the cold makes me look older, but
no.
I've been trying to convince multiple administrations, Democratic and Republican, to either sell or lease to Israel B-1 bombers, or at least let our crews train on one so that they know how to fly one. And I think the reason for that is obvious. I think that sends an unequivocal message to Iran. I think it's a deterrent factor. And it comes up occasionally. It came up during the last round of fighting. I did not get very far with the Biden and the Obama people. I thought I'd gotten quite far with the Trump people. We'll see what happens. I still think it's a very good idea.
So is that your advice then to President Trump?
It would be one of my advice to President Trump. I think this isn't the type of conversation you have to have with the president. Okay, what constitutes a violation? Is it one brick on top of another brick at Fordow? Is it moving around the fissile material? Is it rebuilding missile silos? At what point can we say there's a trigger, a siren goes off? And that has to be a very deep understanding, because our margin for error in Israel is much, much smaller than America's margin for error. And, for example, rebuilding missile silos, and I understand they are rebuilding their missile silos, is for Israel something close to a strategic threat.
And you talked about intent. Now, when it comes to Iran, and you talked about Persian pride and being or wanting to be a hegemonic power, regional hegemonic power at the very least, and unless things miraculously change with the regime, which it probably won't, Israel and the United States are always going to be seen as an enemy, at least to the government of Iran. So the intent is obviously there. So what is the best path forward then to make sure Iran doesn't go past that nuclear threshold? Would it be more kinetic, or would diplomacy, especially now we're seeing the return of Jared Kushner and being a deal maker. You've got Steve Witkoff, who's got good relations with people in the region. And, I've heard nothing but, actually nice things about him in terms of being a pleasant person to deal with. Would you see diplomacy as a form of appeasement? Or would that be a more pragmatic approach here? Because I know you've written in the past that when it came to U.S. restraint and Iran's aggression and provocation, that restraint from the U.S. actually led to more aggression from the Iranians. So what do you see now? Of course. But now we've got the 12-day war.
Of course. I say of course, you say of course. But people in Washington did, of course. Pro-Iranian militias in Syria and Iraq launched something in the order of 180 rocket and drone attacks against American military bases in Iraq, Jordan, and Syria. Wounded dozens of soldiers, killed 3. America never responded against Iran. The Houthis fired at shipping and American shipping. The United States never responded to Iran. What if you're sitting in Tehran you're looking at this, you're thinking, these guys are wimps. I can literally get away with murder. I think that Donald Trump held out his hand to the regime. Says, I'm willing to negotiate. You could be the greatest decision you'll ever made if you negotiate with me. Okay, but it's going to be a muscular diplomacy. It's not going to be based on soft power. It's going to be based on the possibility of hard power. The soft power could be sanctions, but they're much more punishing sanctions than than those imposed on Iran by either Obama or Biden. Much more punishing sanctions, and maybe cutting off the trade in Iranian oil with China, and that creates an incentive to negotiate. But should the Iranian regime attempt once again to get its proxies to fire at American bases, I don't see the United States retaliate against the proxies. I think they're going to retaliate against the people who sent the proxies.
Well, that's interesting. And then within that same Knesset speech that Trump had, I think it was almost a week and a half ago, he's like, I know the Iranians, they want to negotiate. They want to make a deal. Do you believe that? Can the Iranian regime be bought? Like, does everyone have a price, so to speak?
It would be a mistake, but let's go deeper still, okay? Bear with me. Again, 10, 15 years ago, I wrote an article, I think it was either for Time or Newsweek, called How Not to Buy a Middle Eastern Carpet. And I got some flack for this article. They said, oh, you're an Orientalist, you're whatever, racist. They didn't call me a racist, they called me an Orientalist. And what I say, I don't know, you've been to markets in the Middle East. How do you buy a carpet?
You barter.
The first thing that yeah, of course, but the first thing that the carpet merchant is going to ask you is, how much were you thinking of spending?
Oh, I know. I hate that question, but yes.
Yeah, but you can never answer that question, because once you answer that question, that becomes the basis of negotiation. All right? And then you have to always be willing to walk away. And if the merchant runs after you and say, no, wait, I'm going to give you a better price, then maybe you have a deal. What happened in America's negotiations with the Iranians over and over again was, first of all, the Iranians asked, okay, what price are you willing to pay? And the United States, in their first negotiations with Iran, this is 2013, Jake Sullivan and Bill Burns on the island of Oman said, the price we're willing to pay is recognizing Iran's right to enrich. You have the right to enrich. By the way, there's no such thing as a right to enrich, but they gave it to them. Now, once you have given up the right to enrich, the rest of it is just a negotiation. How many centrifuges, how much highly enriched uranium, how much low enriched uranium, then it just becomes details. But you've given up the main things. You've already told them what you're willing to pay. You're willing to pay that. And then every time there was a sort of a log jam in the negotiations, the Iranians walked away, the rug merchants walked away, and the Americans ran after them. Okay, so imagine in a market running after the carpet merchant saying, hold it, don't go away, I want to buy your carpet. Okay, that's what happened. And it is very important. I get the sense that Trump and his team are sufficiently business savvy not to fall into this. So yes, Iran wants, to answer your question, Iran wants to negotiate, but it thinks it can pull the wool. And it thinks it can get away with something like the JCPOA, which was a great deal for Iran, terrific deal for Iran. And really, I gotta tip my hat to them in terms of their negotiations. You can't fall into that again. And what President Trump said was, this was crucial. He said zero enrichment. Basically taking back what Jake Sullivan and Bill Burns gave to the Iranians in 2013 in Oman. You don't have a right to enrich. By the way, that changes all of the calculus in the Middle East. Bear with me again. The Saudis were talking about making peace with Israel before October 7th, 2023. And their chief demand was for American acknowledgement assistance in making a nuclear program. And the Saudis said to Americans, well, we want a right to enrich. And America's, Biden people said, no, you can't have that. And the Saudis came back and said, what are you talking about? You just gave it to your worst enemy. You gave it to the Iranians, and you're not going to give it to us? So basically, by giving the Iranians the right to enrich, the United States had to recognize the right to enrich in virtually every state in the Middle East. And think what that meant.
Yeah, there's huge ramifications. So then would the Iranians go with that zero? Are they that weak right now, the regime, that they would say yes to that and then start rebuilding after the Trump administration has gone and stall for, like going back to that idea of intent, like you said?
All possible.
Or is their pride going to get in the way and they're just going to say no and we're going to see more war?
All possible. All possible. All possible. They're going to ride out Trump, see what happens. But, they may get J.D. Vance, could be tougher. And, they're banking on isolationism in the United States. They're banking on maybe a Democratic victory. They've done better with the Democrats than they did with the Republicans. Banking. But it's important that America, this administration, keeps up maximum pressure on Iran. And they've been doing it. They've been doing a very admirable job.
Any final thoughts, Ambassador?
I hope I didn't sound gloomy. I am, in fact, very optimistic. I don't want to sound glib, but I'm much more optimistic about the Middle East than I am about my flu right now. I might not survive this, I'm a Jewish man, you know how it is. But I'm very optimistic. I think the Middle East is at this tremendous inflection point. And if cards are played right, this region will look unrecognizable in 2 years. And yes, I do believe there's a possibility for an Iranian-Israeli rapprochement, for Iran's reintegration into the region, as what Obama called back in 2011, called a constructive, responsible power. But it could be. Nobody in any way wants to humiliate the Iranian people. On the contrary, we want the Iranian people to have their rightful place as not just a Middle Eastern leader, but a world leader and a world actor. It's all there. It's just playing those cards right. And I think maybe we have a shot at her.
Well, it's really good to end on a positive note. Thank you so much, Ambassador Michael Oren, for joining us today. And I hope you feel better really soon. Thank you. Welcome, my colleague, Maryam Sinaiee. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, it's a pleasure. So let's talk about this story that not only gripped Tehran, but really gripped the entire world. I mean, I was seeing, since the 12-day war between Iran and Israel and the United States' involvement, I haven't seen this much news about Iran. This is, of course, the leak video of Ali Shamkhani. His daughter was wearing a revealing wedding dress. And, for those who haven't been following it closely, why don't you just walk us through what exactly happened and why did it cause such a storm, not just in Iran, but around the world?
Yeah. The leaked video actually shows Ali Shamkhani walking his daughter to the groom at a wedding hall. This may sound like nothing, but there are a few things in the video that could be very damaging to any politician or official in Iran, let alone Ali Shamkhani. Let's not forget that he's a senior advisor to Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. He's a member of his Expediency Council and also a former security chief. So what caused all this there? Firstly, men and women in Iranian weddings, they are always for religious families, they are always separated. So this hall that Shamkhani is walking into is the women's only part of the ceremony. Men are in another part. And quite a few women, guests and staff, are unveiled. Although there are two men there, at least, Shamkhani and the groom. And they don't even make an effort to cover themselves. So he's trying to keep his head down.
Yeah, he's always keeping, even around his daughter, he kept keeping his head down like this. I'm like, what is he doing?
He doesn't want to see the women and fall into sin. So secondly, as you mentioned, the bride is wearing a revealing dress. She's bare-shouldered, has a very low neckline, and this is something quite or very unacceptable, actually, in religious families. Even where all the
even though it's all women, and I mean, because technically her father and her husband are halal or something.
No, if there is a man. But there is the groom, and there is Shamkhani. daughters, they won't appear like that in front of their fathers or their brothers. This is something religious families consider unacceptable. So, thirdly, in Iranian tradition, it's always the groom who walks the bride to the wedding hall. But here, in this case, we see Shamkhani walking his daughter. And last but not least, what you don't see in the video is very important. What you see is not particularly extravagant.
Not at all by Iranian standards, not at all.
It could be the wedding of any middle-class Iranian. But there are a lot of things that you don't see but guess because of the venue. It's a very expensive hotel, the Espinas Hotel in Tehran. Dinner, the wedding dinner is very expensive there. So you don't see the dinner, you don't see the gift, you don't see all the flowers, used to decorate the hall. It's just a very small part of the ceremony. We don't see the gifts, but we know that they must be very extravagant because we see Shamkhani's daughter wearing a very expensive watch. This must be a gift from one of the parents or maybe the groom's parents. So
when you say, sorry to interrupt, when you say very expensive, like what are we thinking? Because very expensive would be different for different people.
Well, I forgot the brand name, but with that money, you could buy a small flat, somewhere not too bad in Tehran.
But this is more than just about the whole, whatever morality and the revealing dress, etc. You write in your Iran International piece online that the leak exposed deep political fault lines. So what's really behind all of this? Some people I know are claiming, well, it was Israel's cyber army. Other people are saying it was from within the regime itself, from different factions. What have you been learning?
I really don't know. It's very hard to say. Both rivals at home and Israel would benefit from a blow to Shamkhani's reputation. There is no way to know who did it. But what I know is that apparently the video was first leaked on Telegram by a Hebrew language. I'm not saying Israeli because I don't know, but it was a Hebrew language account. And then the account on Twitter, X, that first posted it was also related to Israel. I think it belongs to an Iranian Israeli. So this has been used as, an argument that Israel was involved.
So what does this reveal potentially about revenge? Some people are blaming one of the opponents, Hassan Rouhani, the former president of Iran, who comes from the so-called moderates or reformist camp. And this was after Shamkhani had exposed him, saying that the IRGC shut down the Ukrainian airlines in 2020, which of course we already know were hundreds of Canadians died on that flight when the IRGC shot it down with 2 surface-to-air missiles. But in here he says that Rouhani knew himself. So what does this say about the political divides and revenge in Iran and how things are carried out that way?
Well, actually, Shamkhani and Rouhani's rivalry or disputes go way back to the time of the 2015 nuclear deal. Apparently, Shamkhani at that time did everything in his power to prevent Rouhani from making the deal. And Rouhani has a grudge since then, and he has spoken about it. I think he recently mentioned that in a speech or somewhere. So it could have been Rouhani, but it could have been anyone else too. It could even be a disgruntled business partner or even a relative. You have the video. You just need to find a way to leak it. It could be anyone. Rouhani's office, someone from Rouhani's office has condemned this. And
well, of course they are, even if if it makes sense, even if they were technically part of it or not part of it, we don't know, but of course they're going to condemn it.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is, for those who don't know, this wedding happened last year. So whoever leaked it, had it in their back pocket for when they needed it, I guess.
Yeah, 18 months ago, more than 18 months ago, yeah. At that time, there were some rumors on social media. Even the invitation card was, an image of the invitation card was posted on social media back then. The cat came.
And what does this reveal about sort of hypocrisy, and how are people on social media reacting? Do you know kind of the insider reaction inside Iran and even outside? Because sometimes that's the same reaction, sometimes it's different. I know I've been hearing, for example, some people in Iran have said, oh, this is a private event, it shouldn't have been leaked. Other people have said technically when it comes to Islamic law itself, because this was, as you mentioned, on the woman's side, I mean, technically by wearing that revealing dress, she didn't necessarily break Islamic law per se.
She didn't.
No.
It's just tradition, the tradition of religious families that she ignored, to be modest in front of male family members. Although, there is nothing wrong with that.
Of course. But talk about the kind of the reaction inside and outside of Iran.
Yeah. When you say hypocrisy, something that I need to highlight is that the children of officials and politicians in Iran have become their Achilles heel. They can't even impose their values and their lifestyle on their own children. Many of their children live abroad or travel very frequently. Travel abroad, they party, they drink, they wear all sorts of revealing clothes or non-acceptable Western style clothes, and this has become a vulnerability for them. And people know this because in the age of social media, it's very difficult to keep these things.
Yeah, there's an account that I follow called The Rich Kids of Tehran on social media. They're on Instagram and Twitter. It's amazing. And they reveal about all these. And you can see that they come from, this kind of elite, so to speak, class of Iran where they're connected. Either they're the children of officials or connected to these affiliates.
Yeah. Yeah, I personally knew some of them, and I knew that, their lifestyle was so different from what their parents preached. So other people know that too, and it makes them really angry because, for the same things, they can pay a price. They can be fired from their jobs for moral vice, leaks like this really upset people.
So this is a big deal.
It is in a way, but as you said, the wedding where the bride was wearing that dress was a woman's only place. Her father was there only for a few minutes, and the groom, he's okay. She didn't have to cover herself in front of him. But the fact that, the kind of dress that she was wearing, it was not only a dress, it spoke of a mentality. The more revealing, the better. And that's what people understand. And, it makes them wonder about the lifestyle of these people, about the hypocrisy of their parents, what their parents may be doing, behind the scenes, covered from the public's eye. hidden from the public's eye.
Was that his wife, by the way, the nice-looking lady in the blue dress? Because she looked young.
Well, she's apparently his second wife. He has 3 wives.
Of course.
The eldest is very Islamic, you know. I've only seen pictures of her in chador. But this is the second wife, apparently, and there is a third one.
So this is the second one, and he has a third one too? On top of it?
Yeah.
Oh, wait, and is he still married to the first one? So he has 3 wives at the same time? I thought he just got a divorce. You mean they're... Yes. Oh, okay. And this is the mother of the second wife. Okay. Yeah, because when I didn't know if she was the wife because she just looked so young to me. But anyways, so what does this say about...
He's 17 himself.
Wow. What does this say about maybe even the future of the regime? Like you said, if they can't impose their values on their own children, how are they going to impose their values on an entire nation, right? And the next generation. Does that just mean that this regime is on a downfall in terms of this dogma is dead even for their own kind?
It is actually. Yeah, it is actually. And they can do nothing about it. They are very, very vulnerable now. They don't know what to do. So one reason that they haven't enforced that hijab law is that they really fear backlash, popular backlash. Anything can spark, protests. I think they are in a very, very weak position now. And I also think that more than Shamkhani, this is damaging to Khamenei because, at the end of the day, it's him that people blame for everything because he appoints these people, he decides about everything. So it makes him even more fearful of people's reaction because there have been other scandals. This one, was more on the moral side, but there have been very bad corruption cases, like the Friday prayer Imam of Tehran, Ahmad Khatami, and the land grab. They embezzled very expensive piece of land, he and his sons, and nothing happened. Actually, nothing happened. Khamenei didn't even remove him. So people expect him. If he's constantly talking about, simplicity in life, being content, sanctions are a blessing, we need to be patient. This is what he's always saying. But then people see how the officials are embezzling money, how their children are enjoying a lavish lifestyle. So it's people take it against him because he has appointed all of them.
Wonderful. Thank you so much to my colleague, Maryam Sinaiee, for explaining all that for us. It's a really fascinating topic, so thank you for breaking it all down.
My pleasure.
You can sign up for our weekly briefing newsletter at iranintl.com/newsletter. We deliver what you need to know with key analysis, top stories, and exclusive reports direct to your inbox. The Eye for Iran podcast series is brought to you by Iran International, your go-to destination for expert Iranian news in both Farsi and English. For more, you can head to our dedicated English website, iranintl.com/en.